Hey friends, welcome back to the Bald Booktuber. My name is Scott. Today I will be doing a new and improved, or at the very least new, version of my top 11 fantasy series. So this is redone from my list in 2022. You'll see a lot of the same players on the list. It hasn't changed a whole ton, but it's changed enough that I wanted to put out a new video. In terms of ground rules, I must be completely myself caught up on the series to consider it. I do not care whether the series itself is complete or not. That does not go into my rankings. In terms of how I rank, this is based 100% on my personal enjoyment. So your list will be different than mine. So I would love to hear your list in the comments. Let's get started. At number 11, couldn't keep it to 10, sue me, we have the Kingkiller Chronicles by Patrick Rothfuss. This is currently 2 books of a planned 3. We have Name of the Wind and The Wise Man's Fear. Of the 2, Name of the Wind is probably still my favorite of the 2. We have narration by the amazing Nick Padell, who makes this series come to life. In terms of why I love it, the world building is incredible. Rothfuss's prose is almost without peer. We'll talk about somebody who is better later on, but very, very good. We have some complex and rich mysteries wrapped in enigmas, wrapped in riddles, which is always a lot of fun. And we have a protagonist in Quoth who is telling his story over the course of 3 days. It's a ton of fun. I really hope you'll check it out. I love Kingkiller Chronicles. At number 10, we have the Malazan, or if you prefer, Malazan, Book of the Fallen by Steven Erikson. This is 10 books. It is a completed series for those that care about such things. We have a very intricately plotted series of stories surrounding the rise and fall, particularly the fall, obviously, of an empire. And we have tons of power struggles between extremely powerful beings, typically gods, and their impact and interactions with both other gods and with mortals. It has some of the very coolest action set pieces I have seen in any fantasy series. It is magnificently done. It will always be a favorite for me. It was narrated by 2 individuals. For the first 3 books, we had Ralph Lister, who was incredible, and then from that point on, we had Michael Page, whose name you will be hearing again. Michael Page is fantastic. This series definitely is one that intimidates people. Don't allow it to. Jump right in with Guardians of the Moon. Check it out, and I hope that you enjoy it as much as I do. At number 9, we have the Gentleman Bastard Sequence. This is a currently 3-book series of a planned 7. We do know that there are some novellas that should be coming out very soon to additionally flesh out the world. They'll be coming out before book 4, The Thorn of Camor, that we have been waiting on for a while and will continue to wait on, but that's okay. This is a series by Scott Lynch. The first book is The Lies of Locke Lamora, which is also my favorite in the series. And we follow a group of thieves in the fantasy realm of Camor, which is a very interesting type of Renaissance sort of place. If it had a modern day parallel, probably something like Venice is what it most is similar to. And we have, in my mind, the very best bromance in all of fantasy fiction, and that's Locke Lamora and Jean Tannen, who hilariously I pronounced as Jean the first time I read it before I had listened to the audiobooks, and it is Jean. Speaking of the audiobooks, they are made by the wonderful Michael Page, who I just mentioned with Malazan. Michael Page is fantastic, and he's especially fantastic for this series. It is simply the definition of fun. So if you just want to escape, you want some humor, and you want to get away from the mundane for a little bit and follow some adventures and some heists, this is the story for you. At number 8, we have the Dresden Files by Jim Butcher. This is 17 books of a planned 25, starting with Stormfront and up to Battleground. Was the most recently released, and Battleground is my favorite of the bunch. This is a story of the only wizard in the phone book, Harry Dresden. As we meet him in Stormfront, we see him grow and evolve over many years in a decent span of time throughout the series of the novels. In general, each novel represents 1 year in Harry's life. So he starts in his early 20s, so he's somewhere probably in his mid-30s, early 40s by present day. He doesn't talk about his age a lot, but just speculation. This is a series I have been following since the 4th book released, Summer Night, which would have been somewhere in the early 2000s. I think it was like 2004. So each time a new book has come out, I have been there on release day to read it. I will continue to do that. This is one of my favorite ongoing series. I just love the humor involved. I love the heart involved. The dialogue is fantastic by Mr. Butcher. And of course, we have one of the very best narrators in the game with James Marsters, who is Harry Dresden. So all of the elements are there for something truly wonderful. For those of you that have read the first maybe 3 or 4 books and you're not really seeing why it is so lavishly praised, I can only tell you to keep going. It is unusual in the sense that it starts as an urban fantasy in present-day Chicago. Present-day Chicago is always going to be kind of the setting, but the scale of the story becomes more and more epic as we go along, until it's, essentially an epic fantasy series by present time, which is pretty crazy and quite an achievement. Do check this out. It is fantastic, especially if you like anything supernatural. Coming in at number 7, we have the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. This is his magnum opus. This is what he set out to write in terms of something epic in scope and scale, and we are 4 books into a planned 10. I will be a very, very old man. I'm already an old man, but a very old man by the time this series is completed. My only solace is that he is slightly older than me. So hopefully, for both of our sake, he gets this completed in both of our lifetimes. We're set out in the world of Roshar that has these high storms, and the story essentially centers around the magic systems and the different technologies that are used to kind of brave these storms and own this world. It is extremely intricate in how the magic systems are set up, which is not a surprise given who's writing it. Sanderson is known for his intricate world building and magic systems. This series is incredible. It is definitely my favorite thing that Sanderson has done or will do. My only complaint, as always, is that he's focused on stuff outside of Stormlight Archive at this point, and Stormlight appears to be taking a back seat, though we are supposed to be getting Stormlight 5, whatever it will be called, next year. So I will be there certainly on day 1 to read/listen to it. The audiobooks are done by the team of Michael Kramer and Kate Redding, who are also married. They are not my favorite, but they are quite serviceable and very accomplished and very high thought of audiobook narrators. And they do a good job for this series, even if they're not my particular cup of tea, which is no trouble whatsoever. This is a great series. If you're thinking of jumping in and you are a fantasy fan, you absolutely should do it. At number 6, we have The Dark Tower by Stephen King. This is a new entry on the list because I read this for the first time in 2022. This is by far the strangest thing on this list. Extremely difficult to summarize, with the exception of the fact that Roland Deschain is who we follow as our main character. He is part of the Legendary Order of Gunslingers, and it is his mission to get to the mysterious Dark Tower, which is supposedly sort of the nexus of the entire universe or multiverse, or however you want to look at it. It has some of my very favorite new characters that I've ever read, including the wonderful Eddie Dean, who is grappling with his struggles with addiction and loss. I love Eddie. He is fantastic. This series melds so many different genres. We have fantasy, we have science fiction, we have horror, we have western, we have romance, we have action. If you can think of a genre or subgenre, it is here somewhere. We also have pop culture references like Star Wars and Harry Potter are in here. It is a crazy amount of stuff that he stuffed into this thing, including various connections with the rest of his books in the multiverse. An incredible achievement by Stephen King. I can't say enough good things about this series. It definitely has the highest of highs, and there are some low points for me, but nothing that breaks my immersion completely or makes it any less of a series. Highly encouraged. We have 2 narrators that took part in the project. 3, maybe. We'll talk about that in a second. We have the wonderful Frank Moeller, who did books 1 through 4, unfortunately passed away in an accident. We have George Goodell, who did the remainder of the series, books 5 through 7. And then if you want to count it, Stephen King did the narration for Wind Through the Keyhole. So technically the series is 8 books. I like to pretend Wind Through the Keyhole doesn't exist. It is listed as book 4.5. It's not my favorite. But that's okay. No problem there. So definitely some of the most interesting choices narratively made in this series that I have personally seen. I won't get into some of the elements because I don't want to spoil anyone's reading experience. I'll just say, if you think that you know what's coming in this series, you're probably wrong. At number 5, we've got the granddaddy of them all, the Legendarium / The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. I will at some point get to the Silmarillion. I haven't read it yet. I will get to the Unfinished Tales. I'll read everything I can to do with this world and this series. I have been a passionate fan of it since I first read The Hobbit as a little kid, and it will always be something I revisit every couple of years or so. Everyone knows why this belongs. If people are trying to say that this series is somehow dated or overrated or anything else, they're simply wrong. I don't know what to tell you other than they're incorrect. This is a fantastic series that deserves to be higher, but I just happen to love other stuff a tiny bit more. So it is fantastic. There are 2 sets of narrations. I've listened to both. They're both fantastic. We have Rob Inglis, who did the original versions, recorded them, I think, back in the 70s or 80s. They are great, but even more great, the wonderful Andy Serkis re-recorded this back in 2021. They are outstanding. I am waiting for his recording of the Silmarillion, which I understand he is working on right now. Once I have that in hand, I'll be reading the Silmarillion. Super excited for this. I can't say enough great things about this series or Tolkien the man. He didn't invent epic fantasy, but he certainly made it into what it is today. And we wouldn't have many of the stories, many of the series, many of the authors that we have without this wonderful man. Number 4 is the Sun Eater series by Christopher Rocchio, here in the background. I don't know if Rocchio had a specific target audience in mind when he wrote this, but that's me. I am the target audience. There couldn't be a more me series out there in terms of what he is looking to do with his world building, his politics, his philosophy within the series, the dialogue, the awesome characters that we have. We have Hadrian Marlowe, one of my very favorite protagonists in fiction. This is a sprawling space opera set thousands of years in the future, and we have humanity attempting to cling to its own survival as it has to grip with the fact that we are not alone in the universe. Just know this is epic in scale. This is fantastic. I love every single book. We have the magical narration by the incomparable Samuel Rukin, who is the perfect fit for this series. We have novellas and short stories that Christopher continues to produce to flesh out secondary characters and Hadrian himself. We have beautiful cover art. We have everything you could possibly want in this story and more. If you aren't reading Sun Eater, you need to start. The tagline itself should be enough to get anyone to start this story. And that tagline is that Hadrian is Anakin Skywalker if becoming Darth Vader were the right thing to do. Outstanding. You need to be reading this. Make it a priority. Sun Eater does not have nearly enough readership. We need to fix it. Help me do that. Number 3, we have All Things First Law by Joe Abercrombie. This includes the OG trilogy. This includes the standalones. And this includes, of course, the Age of Madness trilogy. I love First Law, and I have since I first read The Blade itself back in the early 2000s. We have the very best narrator that has ever lived in Stephen Pacey narrating this story. He makes every single character come to life. We have humor that is already funny on the page, becoming more so with Pacey's delivery and timing. We have something truly epic and magnificent when it comes to this series. Some of my very favorite characters in the genre, people that I should not love but do anyway. First Law is the stuff. It is not going to land for everybody. If you struggle with things like gray morality, it's definitely not going to land for you. If the humor doesn't work, you're going to be in rough shape. If you don't particularly like some of the themes that he is writing about, or you feel like the world is too bleak or that it is too nihilistic, that's not going to work for you, but it definitely works for me. At number 2, we have Realm of the Elderlings by Queen Robin Hobb, my favorite writer who has ever lived. Probably my favorite writer who will ever live. When I spoke earlier about Patrick Rothfuss's prose, which are deserving of praise, they pale in comparison to this woman. She is by far my favorite writer. I just love the way that her prose just crackles. I love the way that she explores character dynamics. I think she writes the best character relationships in the genre. I think she writes the best character period in the genre. She is by far my favorite, and it's not particularly close. We have a set of 5 underarching series that make up this overarching and sprawling series of the Realm of the Elderlings. We have the Farseer trilogy, which follows Fitz, Chivalry, Farseer, and the Fool. We then have the Live Ship Traders, which is one of my favorites. This follows an entirely different cast of characters in a multi-POV type of format. Essentially, these are sentient beings that happen to be ships. I love the way that is explored. We then have the Tawny Man trilogy, one of my all-time favorite trilogies. That's what I'm reading right now. I restarted Fool's Errand yesterday, and I'm having a delightful time. This returns to Fitz and the Fool. We then go on to the Rainwild Chronicle, which is a quartet. Easily my least favorite in the series, but still good. This is somewhat of a sequel series to Live Ship Traders. I wish it were more so than it actually is, but we do have some cameos and so forth. It is what it is. And then we have my favorite trilogy in all of fantasy fiction to wrap up the story, and that's Fitz and the Fool. This is just magnificent from start to finish. I love all of the themes explored. I love all of the politics. I love following Fitz as a first-person retrospective protagonist. This is 100% for me and others. I'm sure there are many proponents of this series, so I don't want to make it all about me. In terms of narration, it is kind of a tale of two things here. We have Paul Bamer, who is outstanding, doing Farseer. We have Anne Flosnick, who is not my favorite, doing Live Ship and Rainwild. And then we have James Langton, who is incredible and one of my favorite narrators of all time, doing Tawny Man. And then we have Elliot Hill wrapping it up with Fitz and the Fool, and I'm not the biggest fan. So a little bit highs and lows there, but both Bamer and Langton are outstanding, and I would definitely encourage you to check out their narrations at the least. Rounding out the list at my number one favorite, no surprise whatsoever, A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin, starting with Game of Thrones, which I just reread a few days ago, and it never gets old. I never tire of rereading this series. I've been reading it constantly since around 2002 or 2001, somewhere in there, so about 20 years, a little bit more than that. It was my favorite series immediately upon reading it the first time. I have to believe it will be my favorite series for all time. I don't think anything will ever eclipse it. I am part of a read/read-along group upcoming where we will be discussing each book in length that I'm super excited about with Joanna and Yolene and Joanna Souza and Alex from Tall Guy Reads. I can't wait to have those discussions. We'll also be including other booktubers in various videos. It's going to be quite an event. I'm very much looking forward to delving into each book and the series as a whole. This is it for me, the peak of the mountaintop. If Realm of the Elderlings is not capable of being number one, then I don't think anything is. So in terms of the narration, it is done by the professional actor and the late Roy Dotrice. These are not great narrations, but I like Roy anyway. I've spent a lot of time listening to these narrations. I can live with them. It will be interesting to see if and when Winds of Winter comes out, who the narrator will be, and if they will go back and re-record the other books in the series. Obviously, and infamously, we have 5 books out of the planned 7 thus far, as well as some other stuff in the world, like the Duncan Egg novellas that are bound into a single book, Night of the Seven Kingdoms. We have Fire and Blood, which is a historical type of look at the Targaryen dynasty. We have a couple of encyclopedic type of things with The World of Ice and Fire and Rise of the Dragon. So a lot of stuff in the world to dig into throughout the various touch points in the history of the Seven Kingdoms. If you are the type of person that won't start a series unless it's finished, I'm sorry that you're missing out. I would encourage you to make an exception in this case. The fact that it is not finished doesn't dampen my enthusiasm in any way for this series that I adore. So I hope that you will check it out if you have not done so already. So those are my top 11. I could not keep it to 10. I am very excited to hear your top 10 favorite fantasy series. Please list them in the comments. If you have any things that I should check out that would make my top 10, definitely let me know. But until next time, publication over always, my friends.